Good day, everyone. We are the third group, and we're going to discuss agrarian reform. But before we start, let us know first the title itself. Agrarian reform is a law that was made in the Philippines to give land especially for the farmers. And we all know farmers are one of the essential workers here in the Philippines because they are the suppliers for the agricultural products that we consume in our daily lives. Agrarian reform also promotes social justice and industrialization in agriculture.
However, land laws contain provisions that enable powerful landowners to circumvent the law, or even use the law to further sustain and strengthen their positions in power.
When we talk about agrarian reform, it is all about land is equivalent to power. So the question is, what is the relationship of landowners in agrarian reform here in the Philippines?
Just like what I stated a while ago, land is equivalent to power. So, the landowners are the ones who have control and authority to control his or her land. Kapag nawala ang mga landowners ng mga lupa na nasasakupan nila, mawawala rin sila sa posisyon at mawawalan sila ng otoridad upang magkaroon ng pangalan.
What is the relationship of the farmers in agrarian reform here in the Philippines? If the farmers would given a chance to have their own land, magiging pabor sa atin bilang mga Pilipino or bumibili ng mga agricultural product na magkaroon ng mga lower price dahil di na kailangan makihati pa ng mga farmers o mga bayarin sa pag-rent ng lupa doon sa mga landowners. Ang agrarian reform ay merong iba't ibang policies and laws based sa mga era na naganap dito sa Pilipinas. Ito ay ang Spanish era, American era, and post-war era to present.
Before the Spaniards came to the Philippines, land was unequally distributed, and the notion of private properties was unknown.
When the Spaniards came to the Philippines, the concept of encomienda or royal land grants was introduced. Encomienda system in the Spanish colonies began as a result of royal order promulgated in December of 1503. By virtue of this royal order, encomiendas were granted to favor Spanish officials and clerics who were entrusted the responsibility to look after the spiritual and temporal developments of the natives in a colonized territory.
One of the major initial policies of the governorship of Legazpi was to recognize all land in the Philippines as part of public domain regardless of local custom. As such, the Crown was liberty to parcel out huge tracts of Philippine lands as a reward to loyal civilian and militaries. In effect, communal ownership of lands gradually and slowly took the backseat. Private ownership of land was introduced. With this arrangement, every municipal resident was given his choice of land for cultivation free from tax. Large tracts of uncultivated lands not subscribed in a given municipality were graduated by the Spanish monarch to deserving Spaniards. In return for such a duty of encomiendas enjoyed the right to have share in the tribute or tribute paid by the natives. Legazpi himself had granted encomiendas to the friars like the Agustinas in Cebu and Manila. Almost all grants that Legazpi extended to Spanish official and friars were confined to what would eventually become the province of Cavite, Laguna, Batangas, and Bulacan.
Much later, in place of encomiendas, the Spanish authorities began to group together several barangays into administration units. They termed these units as pueblos or municipios, which were governed by gobernadorcillos. Together, the cabezas and gobernadorcillos made up of the landed class known as caciques.
At the passing of time, the Filipino caciques intermarried with Spaniards. This gives such a class of mestizo caste which exists to this day. Through this available position, the cabezas, the governor Silus, gained more and more stature or prestige with the Spanish civil and ecclesiastical authorities and the common people.
In time, the catechists were given the prerogative of collecting tax as well. This act vested in them to great power certainly. This did not help to endear them to the ordinary people. Catechetism as an institution became deeply rooted in Philippine soil. This paved the way to many present-day agrarian problems and unrest. As the catechu system grew, it also became more oppressive. This brought about colonial uprising during the 19th century, which tended to occur in this area, which much agricultural activity such as Central Luzon. Agrarian-related problems were the only source of major conflicts during this time. Land was available in this entire archipelago. The major sources of conflicts and rebellion were really the harsh Spanish imposition such as tributo, polo, and comida.
During 19th century, several developments occurred that solidified the land tenure system and antagonism over its injustice and inequalities. Seeing the Spaniards did not levy a land tax or deed tax, a few records of land ownership were kept. The Spanish government issued two royal decrees, Decreto Regala 1880 and Mara Law 1894. These decrees ordered the caciques and natives to secure legal title for the land or suffer forfeiture. The Filipino peasants, either ignorant of the process, the law, the Spanish written instruction were just slow to respond.
Other strategies of dispossessing peasants from their land holdings were outright purchase at a low price of real estate, also known as realenga, by a Spaniard or cacique from a badly in need peasant. Mortgage system, also known as pacto de retroventa. This is equivalent of today's mortgage system, also known as sangla. The mortgage system is equivalent of today's mortgage system, sangla, where a landowner who has loaned a peasant some money becomes this peasant's landlord. This happened simply because the system required the land to be a collateral. While the peasant had not paid back his loan, he paid the landlord rent for the use of his own land.
The American arrived in the Philippines following the Spanish conquest, where they gained knowledge and become aware about many things in the Philippines, including the land issue. The land issue at that time frequently caused chaos and rebellion in the nation. As a result, the Americans focused on improving and developing about the land in the Philippines. Many proposals and laws have been made in this regard.
The Philippine Bill 1902 set the ceiling on the hectares of private land and corporation. Ang batas na ito ay nagbibigay ng mga regulations sa pampublikong lupain, kung saan ang isang private land ay mayroong 16 hectares at ang corporate land ay meron namang 1,024 hectares.
Pagkatapos ipatupad ang Philippine Bill Act of 902, sunod naman na ipinatupad ang Land Registration Act of 902. Dito, it provided comprehensive land titles under the torrent system. Ang torrent system ay isang sistema ng pagriristo upang magkaroon ka ng katibayan o katunayan ng pagmamay-ari mo ang iyong lupang sinasakupan.
Public Land Act of 1903. This law was implemented to those people that wants to own or build their businesses in farming but only has a limit of 16 hectares of land. But the program was not implemented nationwide and was only introduced in some parts of northern Luzon and Mindanao where there are available, publicly alienable, and disposable land.
The Philippine homesteading system, established in 1903, was intended to stimulate economic development by increasing agricultural output from previously unoccupied land as well as alleviate agrarian problem in densely populated areas of the country.
Nais man mapaunlad ng mga Amerikano ang talakayan patungkol sa lupain, hindi ito nangyari sapagkat ang mga Amerikano lamang ang siyang nakinabang sa lupain ng mga Pilipino. Pangalawa,
nanatili pa ring nasa laylayan ang mga magsasakang Pilipino dahil hindi pa din sila nabigyan ng sarili nilang lupa at andito pa din ang interes ng mga Amerikano na sakupin ang lupain ng mga Pilipino.
So our discussion is about the last era, which is the post-war to present era. But first, I will tackle the three persons that prior to the post-war era. We have Manuel Quezon, the former president, made the social justice program that focuses on the large haciendas and sold it to the tenants. The National Rice and Corn Corporation is the administration that is responsible for assisting the peasants against defenders in courts for their rights. So, peasants, sila yung mga poor farmers na mababa yung status ng buhay and is either wala silang land or nag-rent sila ng land. And yung National Rice and Corn Corporation, sila yung nag-a-assist, sumusuporta, and tumutulong sa mga peasants para sa kanilang mga lands and rights. But then, hindi naging successful yung program na to because abusive acts rises before and maraming gulo or hindi sang-ayon sa mga ganitong program yung mga tao before. So, and because of the World War II that happened before, they had to switch priorities to and focus to the war. Syempre, responsibility nila na make people safe here in the Philippines. So, hindi na nila napagtuunan ng pansin yung program na to and eventually, hindi siya naging successful and hindi na siya natuloy. And the second person is Manuel Rojas. His program is about the 70% of the harvest is belong to the person who paid for the planting, harvesting, and world of animals. This is based from the Republic Act number 34 that the 70 to 30% of sharing. So, yung 70% daw is belong dun sa taong nagbayad for planting, harvesting, and for the animals. And si Manuel Rojas bumili ng 8,000 hectares of land and sold it to the landless farmers. So binigay niya yung land na yun sa mga walang land na farmers or nagre-rent ng mga land para matulungan sila sa pagfa-farm, na instead na mag-rent sila, binigyan sinold ito ni Manuel Rojas para sa kanila. And but unfortunately, yung program na yon is hindi rin naging successful because the farmers had to resell the land kasi kulang sa suporta, lack of facilities na needed, and kulang sa mga resources para ma-maintain yung land na yon. Kasi hindi na, sa isang land hindi naman madali yung pag-maintain, yung pag-aalaga. So because of lack of support and finance na rin, kinailangan ng mga farmers ibenta yon para magkaroon ng income. Hindi siya naging successful because parang nawala rin yung land na yun kasi binenta nila. So because of that incident, the farmers question the importance or the essence of the land agrarian reform na program na para sa Pilipinas, na inaano nila if may mga program ba talaga na para sa mga farmers na i-ano yung rights nila and makita yung mga efforts nila. Kasi nga dun sa nangyari ngang dito sa program ni Manuel Rojas. So, the third person is Elpidio Quirino. They established a program that is called the Executive Order number 335, Land Settlement Development Corporation. Its mission is to expand the peasants resettlement program. So yung yung program na to is about yung paninira ng mga farmers sa mga land. Tutulungan sila ng program na to para masettle yung mga papers, yung rights nila, yung knowledge, para magkaroon yung mga knowledge yung mga farmers kung paano ba gawin, ano bang kailangan, matulungan sila para hindi sila matake advantage ng mga tao. But then again, because nga post-war era yon, they do not have enough resources para masuportahan yung program na to. And alam naman natin yung war noon is syempre nagsisira yung mga facilities, mga infrastructures. So nasisira yung mga lupa. So hindi rin naging maganda or maayos yung flow na yon, kasi nga nasisira yung mga kakailangan nilang resources para magpatuloy yung program na to. So eventually hindi rin nagpatuloy and natigil din yung program na to.
President Ramon Magsaysay realized the importance of pursuing a more honest to goodness land reform program. He convinced the elite-controlled Congress to pass several legislation to improve the land reform situation. President Magsaysay enacted the law as a part of his agrarian reform program. And these laws are the following: Republic Act No. 1160 of 1954 abolished the Lasideco and established the National Resettlement and Rehabilitation Administration or NARA. To resettle dissidents and landless farmers, it was particularly aimed to rebel returnees, providing home lots and farmlands in Palawan and Mindanao. Republic Act No. 1199 or Agricultural Tenancy Act of 1954 governed the relationship between landowners and tenant farmers by organizing shared tenancy and leasehold system. The law provided the security of tenure of tenants, and it also created the Court of Agrarian Relations. On the other side, President Carlos P. Garcia said that there was no legislation passed on his term, but he continued to implement the agrarian reform programs of President Magsaysay. President Diosdado Macapagal was considered the father of agrarian reform. It was during his time that the Agricultural Land Reform Code, or RA No. 3844, was enacted on August 8, 1963. This act abolished shared tenancy in the Philippines. It aimed to free tenants from the bondage of tenancy and gave hope to poor Filipino farmers to own the land they are tilling. It emphasized owner cultivatorship and farmers' independence, equity, productivity, improvement, and the public distribution of land. This act was piloted in the provinces of Pangasinan, Bulacan, Nueva Ecija, Pampanga, Tarlac, Occidental Mindoro, Camarines Sur, and Misamis Oriental. It acquired a total of 18,247.6 hectares or 99.29%. Out of the total scope of 18,377.5 hectares, the program benefited 7,466 farmer beneficiaries. In that time, that act was considered the most comprehensive piece of agrarian reform legislation ever enacted in the country.
Ferdinand E. Marcos. According to him, a presidential decree number 27 is to provide for tenanted lands devoted to rice and corn, to pass the ownership to the tenants and lower the ceilings for land holdings to 7 hectares. Agrarian Reform Program or AR program was designed to improve the farmers from poverty and ignorance and to make them useful, dignified, responsible, and progressive partners in nation buildings. This program was a package of service extended to farmers. Marcos' AR program was labeled as revolutionary. Corazon C. Aquino. Various sectors recognize agrarian reform as a worthwhile social investment in terms of the tenant-teller status. This improved particularly those within landowners' retained areas or on holdings subject for coverage. During administrations that the present adjudication system is introduced. Also, livelihood and agro-industrial project promoted and program of support services were intensified to hold farmer beneficiaries become productive and transform them into the entrepreneurs. Despite the Agrarian Reform Fund or ARF, this administration experienced a major budgetary shortfall due to low remittances from asset privatisation. Fidel V. Ramos. Ramos' administration is recognized for bringing back the support of key stakeholders of GARB. It is credited for enhancing internal operating system and strengthening the capabilities of the DAR bureaucracy. This administration is also credited for tapping more resources to help implement the program. Failure in enforcing the installation of some farmers' beneficiaries on awarded lands became an issue for these administrations. Critics says that non-physical installation of FBS has been the norm rather than the exemption. Some sectors complain on the slowness of this administration in the acquisition and distribution of privately owned lands.
At para doon naman kay President Joseph Ercito Estrada, in 1998, he was very popular during his term. Dahil may isa siyang sigaw doon para sa kanyang kababayan. Ito ang hirap para sa mahirap. During his administration, President Erap Estrada launched ang magkabalikat para sa panglarang agraryo o magkasama. The DAR forged into a joint venture with the private sector into his agrarian sector to make FBS competitive. President Joseph Estrada initiate the enactment of the following law, at ito yung Executive Order number 151. It was on September 1999. It was the Farmer Trust Fund that allowed that voluntarily constitution of a small farm operation into a medium and large scale, indicated that enterprises that can access into a long-term capital. However, President Erap in his administration was in a short term. The masses who put him into his office was demanded for his ouster. And for President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo in year 2000, the agrarian reform program under her administration is anchored on a vision to make the countryside economically viable for the Filipino family by building partnership and promoting social equity and new economic opportunities towards his lasting peace and sustainable rural development. Land tenure improvement, that the DAR will remain vigorous implementing the land acquisition and the distribution of component of CARB. The DAR will improve the land tenure system throughout the land distribution and the leasehold. President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo signed Executive Order number 364, and for the Department of Agrarian Reform was renamed to the Department of the Land Reform. This EO also broadened to the scope of the Department of making it responsible for all land reform in this country. And for President Benigno Simeon Juanco Aquino III, his presidency started in 2010 and ended in 2016. The main reform that he established is CARB year. It means that it is the continuation of the CARB because the CARB established by Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. But it has an expiration date in 2009. So Aquino continued this reform, but he adds something which is turned into a CARB year extension to reform. But it also amends other provisions started in CARB. So together with the farmers and all the bishops and other land reforms, advocates the development of the plan of action for the implementation of the comprehensive or the CARB year. So he continued this CARB reform because of her mother also, who is Corazon Aquino,
because it reformed for his mother, and Benigno Aquino III Advocate Ban, which is the carp year. So that problem on this later on is ay hindi pinamahagi yung lupa, kundi yung shares lang na corporation under ng Hacienda Luisita. And yung pinamahagi niya ay shares, stock, yung binigay, na hindi mismo yung lupa. At dito, yung iba ng mga magsasaka ay lupa talaga ang gusto makuha. So Aquino established the multi-stakeholder. He monitored the carp through the DER or the Department of Agrarian Reform. The carp agencies charged the officials of farmers and federation to monitor the implementation of the carp, especially focusing on the coverage and distribution of agricultural lands, movement and performance of the Department of Agrarian Reform personnel. So also monitored the personnel, the delivery of support service of the beneficiaries, and budget allocation and utilizations. He also monitored he was to monitor the allocation budget if the budget was managed properly. Here comes the present administration, Marcos Jr.'s time. For the outgoing Secretary of the Department of Agriculture or DA, or known name as William Dar, President Marcos Jr. appointing himself as DA chief is a strategic move. Remember, he pronounced to be the handling of the Department of Agriculture. This is the strategic move because it could name the department the top priority with a bigger budget, with the news Dar ad, with the victory of the DA, it arousing the broad public support for the agricultural sectors, rehabilitations, and department.